Yo guys, Punkrat another video, another day closer to phase 2 guys. Another Punkrat video in preparation for phase 2. I told you I was gonna blast these out and I hope they've been decently useful or mildly entertaining. So here's another video in my phase 2 series, this time covering some of the more nitty gritty 1v1 tactics. You'll often find yourself either ambushed by an enemy or stuck to fend for yourself out in the open world. Or you might also find yourself engaging in that duel to begin with for that sweet honor coming up. Now if you want to accumulate a ton of honor to climb up the 14 military style ranks in classic WoW, you're going to need to win most of the fights that you engage in. I'm going to give you guys some crucial information which should help you win more, so that's the video. Here are some of my tips and tricks to win every single duel in classic WoW. Let's get into it. Alright, so the first one that we're going to cover is one of the most old school and traditional vanilla PvP techniques. It's using a stun or a snare into a grenade. This was first popularized by Vertna, the mage, level 60 mage who had those epically infamous PvP montages from back in the day on Warcraft videos. You guys all know of Vertna 1, Vertna 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He was a seriously popular guy, and there's tons of people, especially on the EU servers, who base their undead mage character models or characters off of his mage in homage to his greatness. Now what he would do back in those days in his montages all the time, pretty much on every single fight that he would initiate, was he would nova his enemy and then cast a grenade onto the nova. So you're casting a snare, maybe a stun, incapacitate depending on what class you are, and then lining it up with a grenade on top of that and then casting or hitting the enemy, striking the enemy off of that ability. There's a couple reasons why this is important, and we're going to stick with mages firstly because we're talking about Vertna right now. Essentially, you're going to want to nova the target, and then obviously what you want to do on top of that is shatter that enemy, right? So why would you cast a grenade? Well, the idea is you want to cast a grenade to stun your enemy so that they can't counteract your combo on top of the nova since they're stunned. So let's say you're going against somebody who has a frost reflector. If you frost nova them and then stun them and then cast the shatter onto the stunned nova, then obviously they can't counteract that ability. They can't interrupt you, they can't fear you, they can't do anything pretty much. So you're novaing into a stun and then into a combo. This is also really common when it comes to hunters. Hunters can cast a scatter shot into a grenade into a combo, scatter shot into a grenade into maybe a trap, and basically all it does is give them extra time. And of course they get the extra little damage in from the nade itself. Rogues can do it with a gouge, maybe they can at the end of their kidney shot cast a grenade. Warriors can intercept stun you and then full combo grenade, and then it'll give them a little bit of buffer time to wait for their next auto attack after the grenade stun is over. And it's just a nice little thing that you constantly put into your rotation to extend the stun or extend some extra time for yourself. This is super important, and regardless of what class you are, there's definitely ways that you can figure out how to make this useful. Druids can entangle roots into grenade, priests can fear, and then based on the direction of the fear they can land a grenade, so fear you into a grenade. There's so many different combos, and this is something that you should definitely master. Alright, so this next one is really interesting, quite situational, and a bit risky. We're talking about dark runes or demonic runes. You guys obviously know what this is. Essentially it's a rune that you can get either in Scholomance off the undead creatures, or demonic runes you get off of demons, various demons throughout the entire world, and you'll click this as a consumable. It's on the same cooldown as your health stone, so off the major mana potion, major healing potion, just potion cooldown in general. It'll do damage to you while restoring you mana at the exact same time. Now why this is interesting in PvP is due to spell batching. So considering how the game engine is taking inputs almost like on an interval timing, when a mage sheeps you, you can actually cast a dark rune on yourself right before it hits, and since it takes on the same spell batch in the same global, I guess you could say, or in the same little spell batch interval, the polymorph will go off, but then you'll also get the dark rune damaging effect onto your character pretty much at the same time, and this will allow you to break out of the polymorph. So if a mage is about to sheep you, right at the end of his cast before it connects, you can cast a dark rune and it'll damage you out of the polymorph. This is super broken, and it's very much similar to shadow or deathing yourself out of a sheep. So if you guys played PvP and expansions past the Burning Crusade, you know that priests have an ability called Shadow or Death where they can cast it right at the end of the polymorph cast, and it'll deal damage to themselves based on the tooltip of the ability itself. And then once the polymorph goes off, the Shadow or Death damage will return to the priest and take them out of the polymorph. So that's pretty much what it is. You're dark runing out of a polymorph, and this is super important, especially for healers, since you can absorb the damage a lot of the times to get out of the poly and then just heal it off, or just in general you're not too worried about taking like 700 damage. As a DPS class, it's a bit more of a risky play. You're taking damage to get out of the polymorph, banking on the fact that you'll be okay with that reduced health pool and you'll be able to win just based off that aggressive play. It's definitely situational. It could backfire sometimes, sometimes, but of course it's greatly useful at some times and definitely something that you should know about. Alright, so this next trick, we've seen it on full display in the classic Dueler League, which is tips out 50 grand dueling tournament. I think the person who figured this out to begin with, or who was using it, was Zico, but the one guy who really popularized it and brought it to the mainstream based on the Duelers tournament was Bruce Wayne, or Bruce Wayne, whatever his name is. And essentially what he was doing, where he was sort of slow rolling most of the battles that he was taking, he was kind of stalling them out and scatter trapping, kiting away, mana draining his opponent, or just slowly rotting down his opponent with time. And every single time he was CCing his enemy, he would sort of take a little drink, get the tick, run, take a drink, tick, run, tick, run, tick, run. And the reason why this is important is because that first tick of mana that you get from drinking a mage water or a water in general, it ticks really fast. So you can basically get the tick, break it, run, tick it again, run, tick it again, and you're moving distance while regenning your mana. And this is really useful for a lot of different classes. Mages, if you want to polymorph your enemy and sort of tick, move, tick, move, tick, move, and keep pushing your mana up slowly as you're getting away from the polymorph, getting out of range, so you can start casting fireball on the enemy, or re-polymorph then cast a fireball. And obviously hunters is super important as well. This is definitely a really smart tactic. I'd say it's maybe a little bit more expert. It's kind of hard to know when to use this or when it's useful, but it's definitely something that if you're adept at the game, you could use to your advantage. And we really saw, like I said, in the Classics Dueler League, Bruce Wayne was, or Bruce Wayne or whatever his name was, sorry, I'm probably getting it wrong every single time, he was really killing it with this. And the moment I saw it, I was like, wow, I've actually never seen somebody do that in Classic, and I've played Classic for a really long time. So that was really interesting to see, and I've been trying to implement it into my own PvP playstyle nowadays as well. All right, now this next one is again widely utilized, but some people might overlook it or not understand the deep importance of it. We're talking about swapping your offhand, or just your offhand in general, because you know in Classic when you put on an item, it goes on that baseline 30-second cooldown before you can use the on-use effect. Well, offhands are really interesting in this sense, where you can swap in your offhand within the actual combat itself and then use the ability after 30 seconds. So the two most common ones are obviously Skull of Impending Doom, which is the first one that'll give you a sprint and also deal damage to you, allowing you to get out of CC, similarly to the sort of Dark Room, Shadow or Death type of mechanic, where you'll put the ability onto yourself, it'll start taking damage, and then when the mage sheeps you, it'll just take you out. And then we've got the Furbolg Medicine Pouch, which is again super useful. It's an offhand that you can switch onto yourself mid-combat, and then after the 30-second little buffer timer, you can cast it onto yourself to heal for 100 health every 1 second for 10 seconds. So that's 1,000 health healed over that 10-second duration. Really significant in terms of vanilla standards. This is something that you should definitely be using situationally, but still again can save your life, allow you to win that fight. But the most obvious one is clearly just swapping a shield. So as a shaman, warrior, and paladin, specifically I guess rep paladin, in certain situations you can swap onto a shield, maybe using force reactive disc and some reflecto gear and just reflecting magic damage onto your opponent, using the Stygian buckler to slow your enemies, or just to have increased durability. Swapping to a shield is a simple one and you should know about it. So let's stay on that same notion for this next one. We're talking about changing gear in general. So of course you're only able to change your offhand or your main hand in combat. You can't change your actual gear items, only your weapons within combat itself. But in general, changing gear or having different sets is really useful in World of Warcraft Vanilla. Having a stamina set, a resistance set, a tank set. Let's say you're fighting a specific class on a warrior and you want to be tankier, you might want to switch that on if you see the guy, and then before you engage in the fight you can change your set. Having outfitter for this type of stuff is super important. It's kind of like having a different deck. Before you go into the battle, you might know that you're playing a specific enemy, you might want to switch some cards and get the type of setup that you want to go into that battle with. This is definitely a big factor in vanilla, and in the open world PvP dynamic you could even break combat, switch your gear, and then come back in. Now we've all been watching again the Classics Dueler League, and you might have seen that snuts or SL warlocks in general are completely broken in a 1v1 scenario. How do you beat them? You know, people ask me this all the time. It's hard unless you're a rogue who's got every single cooldown imaginable. Maybe you're a mage who just happens to play perfectly and get kind of lucky on crits. But for the most part, it's really hard to beat an SL warlock, SL being Soul Link. The one way that you can give yourself a serious advantage to beat an SL warlock is by having a shadow resistance set. And this seems obviously crazy, but but it's really not. Having a resistance set in PvP is really smart, in fact. If you have a set that gives you a ton of stamina, a ton of shadow resist, you'll be able to take warlocks fairly easily unless they're incredibly good. And combine that with that blacksmithing trinket that gives you immunity to fear for 30 seconds, it's gonna be really hard for them to beat you. So swapping gear and having different sets for different matchups is super ideal. Having 200 shadow resist, you'll be most likely not taking too much damage from most of his abilities, resisting a ton of fears, and just in general, it'll be a pain in the ass. It's kind of like you're a fell hunter in a certain way. And I'd say the most important part is the fact that resistances actually has a chance of breaking you out of CC early. So my friend, for example, when I was dueling him on my hunter, I kept trapping him, and for some reason, the trap is supposed to last about 10 seconds after the scatter based on the DR, but the trap kept breaking after 7 seconds, and I was like, why the hell is this happening? Well, the reason it was happening is because he had a couple items on that gave him frost resistance. And one thing that we've noticed in the classic WoW engine is that having a resistance to a specific spell also gives you an increased chance to break out of that CC of that specific school of spell earlier than intended. So if you have arcane resistance, you can break out of a sheep early. If you have frost resistance, you can break out of a trap early. It's super useful and definitely something I'd look into. Hopefully I'm not giving you guys fake news on this, but from what I've seen from Sidu's stream and specific different experiences that I've had, this is definitely a thing, and I'd take into consideration having different resistance sets or at least mild resistance items depending on what class that you're facing out in the world. Okay, so this next trick is a preemptive measure that a couple classes can take to outplay their opponents if they're in their head. It's using pre-abolish, pre-tremor, or pre-restoration potion. The most common one that you'll see out there is definitely with shamans just popping down a tremor totem before the fear comes. So instinctually, before you get feared when a priest comes in and maybe tries to drop his fear bomb, you'll pre-tremor, and then as he fears you, the tremor will take you out unless he's able to kill it in time. And as a druid, you can cast abolish poison onto yourself right before a rogue blinds you, and that abolish will tick and dispel the blind off of you. But the beauty of Classic is that every single class can do this. All you need is one restoration potion. You should always have these in PvP if you're a healer, even more important. If you sense CC is coming onto you, you could preemptively cast a restoration potion and it'll tick all of the debuffs off on a 5-second interval, dispelling magic, disease, curse, and poison. So preemptive dispelling is definitely super important and something that you should try to work into your gameplay. Okay, so this trick is probably the most simple one on the entire list, but it's definitely worth mentioning and it's super important. It's using your CC in order to cover for your first aid. Now most classes, it's almost intuitive. You just know to do this. But other people I've seen sort of struggle with this. Pretty much every single class can benefit from this. So a lot of paladins, you'll notice that they'll hodge their enemy and then maybe they're a rep paladin who's just gonna start flash of healing on themselves. You don't want to do this. You want to hodge your enemy, and then if you're playing defensive off the hodge, just bandage yourself. You won't waste any mana and you'll most likely heal yourself for more than you would casting flash of light in a full ret set with basically no plus healing and no holy talents. This is super important. Casting CC into a first aid. Whether you're a rogue and you sap your enemy, you blind your enemy, first aid, re-stealth, open on them. You're a mage, you polymorph, first aid, re-polymorph, and then combo. Hunter with the trap, same thing. Warriors, you can intimidating shout, fear your enemy, and then bandage yourself. This is something that you absolutely have to do on a warrior, considering you have a little bit of utility to begin with. So this is pretty much your utility or your reset. Druids can entangle roots into first aid, warlocks fear into first aid, priests psychic scream into first aid. You guys get it. That's pretty much what I'm talking about. The only people who probably can't do this are shamans, but even they can do it with, you know, earthbind totems, engineering items, whatnot, goblin rocket helm, netomatic, whatever you have it. You're basically using whatever CC you have available to you in order to secure a first aid and maybe get back in the fight, sustain a little bit, and then come back in. This is something that's super useful. It's quite basic and everyone knows about it, but if you're a newer player, you might not have thought about it right off the bat, or it might not be as intuitive to you. Make sure that you're comboing this all the time. It can swing the fight around real good. All right, so there are my tips. Some simple, some widely known, others more niche or situational, but I'd say quite useful as a whole. A lot of what was mentioned in this video is really the core of 1v1 combat and Classic. So if you're new to the game, make sure to get these down packed. I wish you guys good luck in the dangerous world that will surround you come phase 2. And even though it's going to be dangerous, it'll also be incredibly fun at the same time. You might lose a couple battles, but when you win and when you come out on an epic victory, it's gonna far overweigh the little bit of negative feeling that you've gone through. We've been playing classic, but an incomplete version. There's kind of a missing part, but with the addition of PvP now, classic is whole again. I can't wait to see GMs walking around, high warlords walking around, and I can't wait to have an honor tab to keep up with again every single week. So there you have it, that's the video. If you liked it and want to support my channel, make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, of course, you know the drill, soldiers. Hit the notification bell to be notified every single time I post a new video straight out of the render oven. And with that said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.